Worms, however, are of a different nature. That is, 5 or 6 genera of worms are. They come up, take dead material and drag it down their hole. And if you ever see a pine tree in pasture, look underneath it. And if you see lots of little pine needles standing on end, sticking out of the ground, you'll know you've got worms. They come out at night, get hold of one end of a pine needle and pull it down, and then chomp it over the next night. So you see thousands of little pine needles standing up out of the ground. There is no sign in these pasture of worms, and if you find any, let me know. There's no sign there is a worm in these pastures. We've looked. We looked where we were bulldozing. We found 2 or 3 off pasture. We found none in pasture. Grubs, pasture grubs. Yeah, there would be quite a lot of pasture grubs, yeah. Okay, so these then are a very important animal, and you know, it's like vegetarians say, I will not run animals in my garden or something. You can't help it. You've got to dig up all the soil, cook it in an oven, you know, put a sheet of stainless steel down, put your soil back, and they'll still fly in and get in. But most of your garden is operating on animal. And most of your garden is working because of animal manures. Because the only thing that really mobilises trace elements in the system are animals. It's the function of animals in the system to distribute, you know, rare minerals around the system. Plants can't get up and walk. And they don't send much very far, although leaf travels quite a way in good winds. So plants can sometimes get minerals quite a way, and you'll see it go in a big oval away from trees in fields. So you'll pick up quite good phosphate levels where the leaves get to, but animals are much better. They're ripping around and crapping everywhere, and phosphates are going in all directions. And these things are really the most important and the most numerous animals and the heaviest biomass of the acre. There's so many living things in soil that they obviously exceed the capacity of the organic material to feed them. And all we can say about that is most of them must go to sleep most of the time. Whose turn is it to eat today? You know, so most of them must be off, not feeding. There simply is not enough food to support tonnages of invertebrates in soil. And many of them have to be eating each other primarily. Now, we don't know anything about anything, and particularly we don't know anything about soil, and particularly in soil, we know nothing about soil life. There's over 1 million species of nematodes in a square metre of soil. What are they doing? And who are they doing it to, and with, and for what reason, and who's paying them? All this is unknown, right? There are 6 kilometres of fungal hyphae in a square metre, surface metre of soil, you know, of many species. So when the soil is alive, there's a huge turnover, very rapid amount of cycling going on, animal to animal, plant to animal. You may excuse yourself. Betsy, go and have a glass of water. I'll stand still, just... I'll stand still, you have a glass of water. You can cut that bit. Well, if not still, I'll stay in line. Well, I'm generally unaware of you. When you cough like that, one can't very well ignore you. Right. So worms are important because they eat any dead plant material and bring it down the soil, add to the humus of the soil. And if they're the right worms, the genus Lumbricius and a couple of other genera like Oncophorus, they come up again and spit it all out on top. So the right worms for pastures are not those worms that stay below the ground and therefore eat only root materials, but those worms that come up and leave little squiggly heaps of worm casts on the soil, which immediately wash down when it rains. But if you've got a neighbour with fussy about lawn, keeps a close-clipped lawn, often you'll see lots of little worm casts sitting up on the lawns. And then what they do is they get rid of the worms because it makes the lawn look untidy. And how they do that, and they do it also on golf courses, they put on a nitrate fertiliser. And that, you know, in the first misty rain turns to partly acids and kills all the worms.
Why would there not be worms over in the bedding patch?
There ought to be, and that's why that pig's rooting there.
Yeah.
Ought to be. And might be there the worms we want, the ones that leave casts on top. And that's where perhaps we should look. Now, do keep your eyes out.
What's the name of that kind
Well, I gave you two of the genera, I think Oncophorus and Lumbricius. But there are maybe 5 of one and 2 of the other in those genera, all of which are casting. And they live fairly happily together.
Yeah.
No.
Is there
No, because I'm telling you the worms in Tasmania.
is there a way
but,
to use commercial fertilizer?
There are experts on worms here, some in the universities, some ag department, and you're well advised to go and find out your worms and the sources for those. But if you want to be totally, you know, go and find the worms that are leaving casts on the field, because they're not any further than that below the surface. Where you're getting worm casts, you've got the worms you want. That's what we're saying.
New to worms.
Worms come up, take only dry material from the surface, pull it down, eat it, compost it, put through soil and this stuff, and come up and spit it all out on top. But those castings contain a lot of plant nutrients. And you know, for your sake, Vint will read out the proportion of each nutrient in worm cast. But the interesting about worms is Charles Darwin started his life off writing about worms, not about the origin of species. He studied worms and he measured the cast, and he estimated they put 40 tonnes of high-quality fertiliser per acre on per annum. Nobody can afford to put that much fertiliser on.
What about the dolomite? That was to raise the worms?
What was?
Putting
Atomic.
magnesium, the dolomite on the side when you turn it
Well, you know, you've got to offset any acidity present there, and it can be quite acid on top of these limestones. Otherwise, you're not going to get worm eggs. They can't breed at acid conditions. So you just put a handful of dolomite per pad, and they will breed. Now, Vin got some figures out for you. I'd like him to come and talk about them and around them. And I'll leave you with a general picture, but you've got it.
This kind of a mixed audience. So we contacted the home office in Topeka, Kansas, and got the following information on worms. Worms produce 25 tons per acre added to a field in castings. And worm castings in the upper 6, add to the upper 6 inches of soils 5 times more nitrogen, 7 times more phosphates, and 11 times more potash. Okay. In the upper 6 inches of soil, compared to surrounding soil that does not have worms in it, those soils are 5 times richer in nitrogen, 7 times richer in phosphates, and 11 times richer in potash. Worms produce 3 inches of new topsoil every 15 years. On the average, poor soil might support up to 250,000 worms per acre. Fertile soils, live soils, will provide or produce 1.75 million worms per acre. Where there are no animal manures on the pasture, which is a primary worm food, you might find only 13,000 worms per acre. In the presence of manures, you'll find up to 1 million. Other little known facts about worms. Compost over 125 degrees Fahrenheit in temperature will kill worms. There was a comparison that was done in the 50s where one plot of ground was fertilized using lime, manure, and other unspecified fertilizers in the resource that I have. And one plot, the grasses and legumes were simply cut and laid down for mulch, and worms were introduced. What was being grown was barley, bluegrass, and lespedeza, and the plot with worms had 5 times the vegetation produced in that plot compared to the fertilized plot.
Here we go. You want the worm equipment? You have to make it. It's not on commercial sale.
Turf vendors, big turf industry.
There is, and no such turf is better sprayed. If you find a living worm in it, I'll pay you $5. You need a big heavy wheel on a little hitch to your back of a truck, right? There's your truck. And a big wheel. It need only be that big. It needs to be heavy. You can make it out of 2 flats and a roll, weld it together and fill it up with water so it's heavier than it looks. And at a decent interval on there, say 12 to 15 inches, it has little sharpish things, right?
I saw one of these in, down the road.
Oh, you buy it. Buy it. So it goes along and it cuts the turf into, well, let's do the actual side, into bricks like that. Okay? About 15 inches by 7. But it doesn't do these bits. So far all it's done is those, right? So then you have, following your wheel, you have a chisel like that, and it's dipping below the turf there. And the turfs are flowing up there and picked up by a little chain and brought up to the tray of your truck. And you're taking them off and stacking them along the front of the tray. Little turf bricks coming up. And you get them up green side up, but you stack them green side down on the tray. And then you pull this pin and leave this equipment where your worms are. Off you go with your truck, stacked up here with turfs. Okay? Each of which has lots of little worms in them because worms only go down that far, casting worms, and all the turfs have a few worms in them. Right. Now, you fix to the back wheel of your truck on a little drive a little chain that comes down to the ground again, a little cross-chain system. And you go drive along very slowly, placing your turfs back right side down on the chain, and it just leaves them behind there, right? Little turfs are dropping every 30 feet or so. And here, you get on the back of your truck, you have a little hopper, which is triggered by the turf, and it drops about a handful of dolomite on the root side of the turf, because worms will not breed without sufficient magnesium and calcium. So little dolomite-covered turfs, you can put it on as you put the turf on if you want to, are being laid down behind your truck for miles. And from each turf, in the next 8 years, worms crawl madly to the mating calls of the worms in the next turf, slowly seeping across the landscape and applying what we've decided is between 25 and 40 tonnes of fertiliser per acre per annum, rich in NPK.
How much dolomite?
Put a handful, a little scatter. So if you didn't want to stand by that chain and just scatter it while somebody puts it on, but really it's a sort of two-man job to worm up a few thousand acres. And that's how it's done. That's better than going around with a blunt hoe striking fruitlessly at the stubborn ground. You lay them grass to grass, and your worms come out, chomp on all that grass, enriched by your dolomite, you know, lay eggs, you know, you put your ear down there, sometimes like hear little wedding ceremonies and receptions going on, little worms getting married, having babies, not at the level of technology that condoms are yet introduced.
The dolomite goes under the
No, on top of it, put it down wrong side up, roots up with dolomite on that side, and gives the worms a little grass sandwich to eat. You're making grass sandwiches.
But the dolomite on top of the ground.
No, it's on top of the turf.
Which turf? It's in between the two turfs.
No.
No,
It's not in the sander.
It's on top of the
It's on top of the dirt, the roots that are sticking up.
yeah. Well done.
You went to all that work and then you wound up sprinkling the dolomite right on top where God and everybody can see it?
Yes. Open to the angels and skies, where it sees every morning the sunrise and every evening the sunset, and becomes invigorated with spiritual power. And the worms coming up to cast, just incidentally get coated with spiritual strength and sinking down again, reinvigorated after a little while on the exercise machine, speed off across the pasture and start colonizing out.
Like ball lightning.
Really, very, very similar.
Okay. So we all own.
Bloody scientists. I just get wound up and carried away, and you bring me right back to earth again. Okay, so there's your two little tools, your little turfer and your little turf layer. So, what more can we do for these poor animals? We can analyse the bejeebers out of the soil, and totally independent laboratories. Do not send it to your local agricultural college. Do not send it to your local fertiliser company. They'll find you've got an amazingly large deficit of everything they sell. It's like doctors. Whenever you go in and you're a woman and say, my God, I feel terrible, terrible, I say, it's a Valium deficiency. Chisel ploughs. And there are a lot of them. The farmer's machine is the Wallace plough, which is a straight tool frame with this setup on it. Very good disc here, sharp disc, which is usually got wavy edge, splitting the turf, followed by a shank with a little foot on it like this, just under the turf. It's 4 inches. And then next year or the next soft soil period, 6 inches, and then 9 inches maximum. So you're travelling that way. This little guy's splitting the turf and allows you, and then you can adjust the shank up or down. And you set it, well, you can adjust the whole machine up and down, right? So you set it at these different depths successively. What soil can you recondition? Anything that doesn't strike sparks often. Any sort of soil. And under what conditions, this is the point, under what conditions do you rehabilitate soils? Well, now is perfect. After rains, while the soil's soft and moist. When it's not dry and it's not soggy. Dry soils, you tend to kick up dirt on top of the grass. And you don't want to do that. We recondition football fields and they play football on it next weekend. And the wet fields close in after you go through. They just lube back into place. So those extreme conditions are bad. And so when chiseling conditions are good, like a couple of soaking rains, you should do a lot of ground and then you should leave it till soil conditions are good. And the way to find out is go out and try and chisel. And if you're bringing up clods of dirt and dust, and if you're glugging along, it's too dry or too wet. The chisel ploughs with Wallace, I think all of them come with a seed box up here with a feeder and a tube down here. And the seed drops into your chisel line, falls in it, usually gets in a bit here somewhere, and comes out there. And its roots tend to follow the chisel trace. I've made these little bow lines in the soil after you chisel. And so what happens to water is it pools. They're all mini swales, runs over, goes down here, fills this. So it's got an awful long trip down a field. It's chiseled at every 18 inches. It's got to fill that up, go to there, go down there, fill that up. Now, the last thing is, under what pattern do you chisel? Here's your creek, and here's your ridge. And what you do is, you go to the head of little valleys, and chisel towards the ridge downhill, like that. So you sit up in your little valley and you drive downhill to the nearest ridge. And then you just go parallel to that. And what actually happens, because of the way this lengthens in the landscape, is eventually that happens. So you brought the water to the ridge. If it runs out of the end of your chisel lines, it's got to come back. No, it can't come back, it's always going back out again. And then eventually it can come back to the creek, way down the creek.
Is that downhill from upper right to lower?
Yeah. You just chisel off contour, downhill to the ridge. Also how you should fence, if you're fencing for cattle, go up here, stick a big post in, go downhill to the ridge and stick a big post in, come back to this valley, stick a big post in, so you fence. Water goes up to your creek lines, down to your ridge line.
So you go down the hill to get to the top.
Yeah, when your cattle are walking, they're walking out to the ridges. So what are they doing? They're bringing the water out to the ridge tops. Is that clearly understood? Because cattle are real lazy, and normally what they do is they walk straight downhill to the creeks. And your water rips down those cattle trails, often gullies them, and dumps all your silt and fast water in your creeks, and it's gone. Understandable? And your watering points, if you've got this choice, and we often do, are here. There's your ponds. I've done a couple of properties like this, real successful. So you use the drift of game and cattle, wombats, wallabies, cattle, whatever, to actually bring your water out of the valleys to the ridge tops. Not that perceptible. If you're going to be real accurate, you can go downhill about a foot a mile. So you just, but the faintest downhill cast. So your water moves awfully slowly down these chisel lines, down these lines. And it may never actually get to the ridges. It absorbs a lot. Your absorption into those things, if you look at your water after rain, you might get 15 inches of it in there, and you get an awful lot down there, and you get a whack of a lot here. So you're putting a lot of water into the soil. And if you chisel well at the right time of year, your soil neither bogs nor does it drought. So it's very safe to drive over your fields at any time then. Don't ask him, ask me.
I wasn't paying attention at a certain point. The chiseling on the right-hand side of your drawing, slightly down to the ravine.
We're going up to the head of a gentle valley, and we're looking at the ridges that lie either side of us, and we're going faintly downhill to the ridges with our tractor. And then we're going on parallel to that after we strike the first few lines like that. The other thing to take a little care of in this country is either flag or do something with things you don't want to chisel out too, because you're cutting through roots. So, keep your eye out for barrel cactus and all those little guys that you don't want to lose. It doesn't hurt to chisel around some. Okay. Now, any questions about soil conditioning? What are you going to put in your seed box for your pasture? Dandelion, chicory. I speak to turkey man as against a cattle man, because turkeys love thistle seed. Cattlemen hate thistles. And sheepmen detest them because they get in the bloody wool. In the wool of the animals. How can I say this?
Finish chewing your food.
Say woo-woo. Woo. Little. Little. Wool. Yeah? There are tons of grasses, and they come everywhere. Alfalfa. Clover. What clovers? White clovers. Reds if it's swampy, strawberry clover. If you're in real soggy country, strawberry. What has a lot of money? Well, just put a handful in and a lot of sawdust with it. So just get one here and there. We said it. Yeah, some medics or vetches don't hurt. You can mix it in with the other seed. You can put a seed mix if you like, but these chisel ploughs allow you to put a specified seed in a specified chisel line. So you can put in 6 or 7 quite separate crops. If you're not grazing, certainly radish. If you're grazing, turnip, because you can both graze off the tops and the roots early winter, and mainly for sheep and goats. If you're going to feed turnip to cattle, what do you have to do? I give you a turnip. It's about this bloody big. Yes, they do. They choke on it. You've got to have a turnip chopper to feed it to 'em. But if you're letting sheep in on it, they take the tops off and then they chew the root down. So watch what you're putting in. You don't want to choke cattle on if you... Kill me cattle with turnips. Mm. All of us of my age, of which there's no one here, spent years and years over wooden troughs with a spade cutting up bloody turnips. Today in Austria, as we speak, barns are half full of sugar beets, and they put those through ordinary old turnip chopper and feed them to the cattle.
Maybe there's a tree or a bush you could plant that attracts birds that eat the insects off the cows.
Yeah, Tagasesti. We've drilled Tagasesti. Yeah.
What about chiseling through juniper that's this high?
You put on less blade and you pick a head on your shank, which is different, called a, what is it called? A batwing head. Looking down on this one, this shank, it's, you know, fairly slender, has a little nose on it, and the batwing is, and reaches across here, right? So that's a total root chop of existing things there. Fat wings are shot through your unwanted, non-palatable weed. White horehound. Yeah, bat wing it a few times. No, I don't know. What you've got to do, most things, if you chisel them 4 or 5 times, they really lose vigour. Don't know. Oh, this is that big. Not that sage it won't, you just bend your chisel. And what's more, you'll get so many leaves in the tractor radiator, your tractor will boil, and they are slowly going on fire, everything bent up in the middle of your sage. Just tell you, when you hit a decent sage with a small tractor, what happens? With a chisel, your tractor turns over backwards without its own axle, so you're squashed as well. You're squashed and on fire and bent up.
It could die.
It deserved to die. It's not a lot of problem to brush serious stuff off with a bulldozer blade with a little set of rippers underneath. It just picks the roots out, you know. What do you call those blades, Doug? Stick rakes. They don't leave anything in there. I mean, they're big blades, aren't they? I mean, as wide as this room. And they got little teeth under them. They just take all the roots out, comb it all out.
Do you want to get rid of that stuff?
Do I?
Would we want to get rid of all the junipers here? All the little ones that's invading some of the pastures?
I think you've got to be joking. You know, junipers represent a place to start other trees that have high forage value. And also, what I would suggest to you, that when you want to enrich the range, which is what we want to do, enrichment comes from which trees? White oaks, some selected legumes, honey locust, chrysopus group, you know the group. But a juniper is a mother tree. Yes, it just takes us time about it. It mothers the trees, it enriches the range. You can put in good nut-bearing pine, which there are several, right? You've got about 3 fairly common pinon, Pinus, monophylla, Pinus, this, Pinus, that. And you've got a rare pinon called Pinus maximiliensis. Comes from a single small plateau in Mexico, which has an enormous pine cone and lots of nuts. And you have a pine called Coulter's pine, which has a huge pine cone and lots of nuts. These nuts are the things for often squirrels, you know, turkeys and ground foragers. So they're rich in the range, but also the crop is a good crop. All the pine nuts are good crop. And you have the Afghan pine. You have,
Some of that right out
yeah. Mm.
here. Alderica, Alderica.
Yeah, and actually you can use digger pine, Sabiana. Yeah, Sabiana is much more accessible to a lot of small foragers because it doesn't have a hard husk. You know, there would be at least 30 nut pines, some of which are adapted to extraordinarily cold conditions. And you can go, you know, you can go out getting pine nuts for part of the year if you want. It's a crop. It's expensive, very expensive. Big industry. If you go through the old pine plantations, you find hundreds of little stone ovens, hundreds, where the pineros work, and they bring in all the things and roast them and shake the nuts out. Just pop over the range from where you are, drop down on the other side, and there's just thousands and thousands of little ovens through there. And then you bury all the unripe pine cones in big pits, and they keep there for 12 months. And any time you run out of pine cones, you go back because they're ripening in the pits, and bring them up and roast them and shake the nuts out. This is first-hand information from the Kwiwi Tokata, or the Shoshone group, the Kwiwi eaters.
Get the cones off the tree.
You all go. You sit Grandma down the ground, light a little fire beside her, and she has a deer skin. And send the kids up the trees, little hooked clubs. So, yeah, they're beating it down. Yeah, little hooked clubs just to snap your cones off. And you have the ladies underneath with large blankets to carry them on their backs. And they take them back to the old lady who roasts what need roasted. And then you beat them all out and you take home all your food for the year. It takes you about 3 days to get all the pine nuts you can eat all the year.
Now, when you say green, what stage of green?
Well, fully developed, but not breaking open yet.
You want to get them before the animals.
Yeah, but they're getting some anyhow. I can't remember the flower in the valleys that blooms when the pine cones are ripe, but I've got it written down. Pardon?
Yeah,
I think that one, the right?
There's a flower. Doesn't hit me between the eyes, but I got it written down. It's in my recipe book. Who's got my recipe book? When have a look at pine nuts. You know, when the something blooms, the pine nuts are ripe. Then you send the scouts out to locate the best stands. So you got to involve everybody, Grandma and the kids, the wife and the warriors who are down on the ground knocking them down with sticks, right? You don't work, you don't eat. I'll make a little quote in there under pine nuts somewhere.
When the rose hips
Yep.
are red in the valley.
Yep.
The pine nut rows are swollen on the,
The rose hips,
rose hips, red in the valley.
the pine nuts are ripe on the trees. When oak leaf is as big as the ear of a squirrel, what then? Plant your corn. This is what you call phenomenological time. There's nothing to do with the date. Everything's to do with the stage of the season. Right. So so we're sowing additional, they're non-grasses, right? Forbs into our pastures. And if the real rehabilitation comes if we can A, graze them flat before we chisel, or mow them very short, no matter which. And secondly, if we can rest them for, as little as 6 weeks after we chisel. Then we've got a really different pasture. Aerated, good water penetration, very little runoff off these pastures. Very slow water percolation then for the next umpteen years. From the top of a hill to the stream at the bottom, if you've got your water in the soil, it can take 5,000 years. So you've got a lot of water on its way very slowly for a long time. You should not see drought again. Okay.
What was the rest period again, Bill?
6 weeks to let your stuff get up and get some root down. Because even if they're grazed off and the roots are well down, they'll come back.
What's the time lag between 4, 6, and 9?
1, 2, and 3 here. Where's 4, 6, and 9?
Inches, sorry. 1, 2,
Oh,
3.
okay. First chiseling of your field. That's an opportunistic thing. I wouldn't bother sowing until I'd done it at 6. Then I'd sow. And then I'd go through that, because you can't get up the same chisel lines, at 9, and then boom, the whole thing comes away. It really is a different situation.
You'd sow at 6?
Yeah,
You go through it.
yeah.
At 9, does it bother you going across it?
How in the hell are you going to go across a system which has got to run faintly downhill from valley to ridge? You can go a bit across it, I suppose, but you can't follow the same lines. It's not possible. I mean, basically, if we...
Discussed across it. That was on a flat?
a dead flat. Really what you've got is something like that really belongs in here somewhere, and this belongs here somewhere, It's, yeah.
So what's the time lag between 1 and 2 and 3? Is there a
If you're
time-
lucky, you get 1 and 2 in the first season, first wet season, during dry spells between rains. And 3, probably next season when you don't re-sow. If you've got a satisfactory stand of chicory and other things, you just chisel through and just take a whole lot of the roots right down there. And every time you chisel, you get 2 sources of humus. You cut some standing roots and you get some top death, but certainly you get a fair bit of root death. So humus is being built in from the bottom of this to the surface. And it's a miraculous change in pasture health. If you chisel comfrey, you get a lot more comfrey. If you chisel alfalfa, you could get a lot more alfalfa. And you can particularly get an awful lot more alfalfa if you chisel it when it's seeding. Seeds right. And that goes for everything. If you put in a crop of daikon in chisel lines, let it flower and fruit, and wait till the pod's dried and run through a chisel again, have you got a crop of daikon? Yes, you have. You've got a big crop of daikon. The other thing to do is go through a short pasture and set in, you can use some blood and bone or something, dribbling down your seeds. Just set in some watermelons. And then you're never going to get them all because, you've got a lot of watermelons. So then you leave the rest on top, and just before the winter, chisel them all through. So the pulp's broken up and the seeds are freed. And next year you get a lot more watermelons. And you can carry that on for 20, 30 years. You never have to resow your watermelon. You got it? If you chisel, then what you want is seeding. You're going to get a lot more of it. It's a nice way to rear some things. You can chisel into pasture, sort of pasture you like. Sow millet, millet comes out and beats your pasture. Head your millet off, take the seed off, let your pasture come away. You can sow millet or sorghum or corn in the same place year after year if you want to. Pasture, sorghum, pasture, millet. Turn your cattle in on the forage, fodder, daikon, beans. Chisel a strip and put every known bean in it. Broad beans, cowpeas, black-eyed peas they're called, black-eyed beans. You can put little mung in, adzuki, and the dryland bean. No, not lab. Don't put lab in. No. Yeah. Fava beans, thick beans, called the small favas. Yeah, but what are they called really down the Sarsi beans? No, not adzuki.
Pinto bean.
No, not a pinto. You can put pinto in. It's got a name, you know what it is. The pea we use a lot in the desert. Capri beans. And, yeah. There are about 50 teparies, if you like colours, So put them all in and chisel them in and pick all you want as green beans, take all you want as dry beans, let the rest fall through the leaves and go through and chisel again. And that can go on forever.
4 inches on these?
Well, if you've already got a 6-inch chisel through, you can put a 6-inch chisel back again. Strip cropping like that, daikon, teparies, fava beans, a few lupins. You can get the sweet lupins, white lupin, Lupinus alba, out of which most of your tofu is made. Well, it's about strangling everything it can get on. It throws cords around any little trees or anything else growing there and just it kills it, It goes up round bananas and prevents the long leaves unfolding. It ties them up. You've got to bash your way through the field with a machete. You want a machetero to accompany you to go and pick your beans. It'll trip you up and strangle you while you're down.
It's a sweet lupin.
Slight exaggeration there, Ted. I'm glad you didn't point it out.
Sweet lupin, you don't have to leach.
No, the Lupinus alba, no. It's an annual, but it's a good crop to run into the dry. And you can make your jolly old tofu and your jolly old, whatever it is with it. And it's a good little nitrogen fixer. It's got good nodules on. Right, so we haven't put any grass in because we're going to get the grass. So this is an important technique. It's the important technique for heavy animal compaction. So, what else do you want to know about pastures? Is the last thing to tell you about, which we didn't discuss here, and is rotating pastures. And I think maybe we discussed the extent where no less than 15 and maybe no more than 18 changes around. In 1947, we would be running the same number of milking cows as we had acres. And we had our electric fences up, 47, 48, 49. And we would strip off a section of pasture each day like a clock, going round in about 12 months. Now, if you read your good pasture management things, your pasture shouldn't be much more than 9 or 10 inches high before you're moving something onto it. It's sort of not young, so it's not oversupplied with nitrogen. It's starting to age, so it's getting some protein content. So at that point, your cattle can get healthiest food. When it goes past that and gets stalky, it's hard to digest. So we were rotating things around the cow shed in those days. We just cleared the forest, blown out all the stumps with gelignite, lit all the trash, had a big ash bed, and gone over it with 8 or 10 high quality pasture species, and we were milking our first cows, called pioneering. It's how all this country happened. So we were doing it in those years. It cost you $1 an acre to buy forested land, and you cleared it by hand and gelignite. So that's what we did. And the first crop we sowed wasn't grass, it was cabbages and cauliflowers. And we followed it a few weeks later with the grass. So we had this giant, 30 acres of cabbages and cauliflowers. We swamped the market. It was our first lesson in, dumping theory. We ended up having to give most of them away, really. But then through came the clovers and grasses, and we started the cows around with electric fencing. Now that was a rotational grazing, and it's no different to what you have to do today. And it's been done for at least 50 years using permanent electric fences. You cut your hay, you cure it properly, you put it in barns which are properly aerated, pulling some of the heat off it, and you feed it out to your cattle inside when the snow's too deep for them, which is most of the time. Or you go to Scotland or areas like that, which is at 60 degrees, 62 degrees latitude, and you buy Highland cattle and run them outside. So test your soil. You may have to use salt licks. All the animals you have down there normally travel to salt licks. So to salt licks. The other way is to get some copper in for the pasture, but not for you, by God, you don't need copper, is to add a few crystals of it to drinking water, and the animals urinate it out as they normally move about in the fields, and the plants pick it up for photosynthesis. Cobalt can be lacking too, so your animals are not synthesizing B vitamins. And they get a funny disease called white muscle disease. They go all weak and wobbly. Saw a few weak and wobbly animals down there today, actually. Selenium, of course, regulates heartbeat, but it's a deadly poison in excess, ferociously mutagenic. So, when you need a small amount of selenium, you need a small amount of selenium. And seems to regulate sort of spasmodic muscular activities. I think. Do you know anything else about selenium? Yeah, selenium's a bad one. It makes mercury look positively benign. The other thing you must ask for when you get your soil analysis is, what in the hell does this mean? It's not sufficient for you to say, there's no radioactivity and zinc is 5 billion parts per ton or something. What does that mean? What does it mean? What do I have to, what adjustments would I have to make in pH in the field? Or what adjustments would I have to make? Can I have excessive iron? Can I have excessive magnesium? What does that mean in terms of health or roll-on effects? The ultimate way of finding out if your pasture is too bad is to look at the cost of your veterinary cost per animal. And when they get too high, you've got problems at base. And that's well up point, where stress on your animals is so great that the cost of keeping them alive is greater than their value. There may be another explanation. Your vet is charging too much for doing very little. An excellent soil test laboratory, it won't cost you more than $500, and they'll do, a bit of radiation for in case your radium build up too high. You can ask them to do your cadmium; it's always safe. But what you're really after is your zinc, copper, cobalt, and after interference, and your balanced magnesium ion, and also your other trace elements. So And when you've got to put an ounce of molybdenum on per acre every 10 years, how are you going to get an ounce on per acre? My little scientist. You'll have to do it like that. And perhaps something conspicuous like sawdust as well. Otherwise you cannot get an ounce on an acre. And you've got to have, the other thing this place is sadly lacking is, how do we know what went on last year? It doesn't have a field journal. And that is bad. You've got to have, sort of leather-bound journals, wherever the people are working in the fields, and they've got to record what you did. Because 10 years later, you've got to renew your molybdenum. And how are you going to know it ever went on, or which fields it went on to? And that journal belongs to the property like all old masters belong to the pub it's sold with. You don't ever sell a pub and take the pictures down, and you never sell a farm with those journals. And some of the journals on Tasmanian farms go back to 1802, 1801.
They don't keep them on discs either. Keep them on hard copy.
Hard copy in a big wooden chest labelled farm journals. And in that journal, everybody who works on a farm can write, and some must write, everything they planted, what happened after they planted it, how they planted it, which fields they put it into. Where you put the trees that day, how you planted them. Critically important. He who ignores history is
Doomed to repeat it.
condemned to repeat it.